Hasan Piker won't tell you to vote for Joe Biden. Twitch streamers could have a serious impact on the election, even by sitting it out. The left's favorite political streamer, Hasan Piker, doesn't know if he's voting for President Joe Biden and doesn't care if you do either. Nearly every day, Piker streams on Twitch for around 8 hours to his more than 2.6 million followers on the platform. You just can't have an 8-hour political stream and expect it to be filled with like 100% informative content. Like, I know he does gaming stuff as well, but like, I just can't imagine talking for that long and having interesting things to say unless you're literally watching an event as it happens, just kind of sitting back as history develops. Anyway, I'm just saying, like you'd have to like make half of that politics and the other half gaming. But I know he's complained quite a lot about how a lot of people jump out when the gaming stuff happens. He's not a household name by any means, but he's become one of the most influential political commentators for Gen Z and young millennial audiences online over the past 4 years. A few years ago, he hosted Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on his Twitch stream to play Among Us and urge his audience to go out and vote. So it matters if he doesn't support Biden. Let's talk about it. Well, I don't know. When he says it matters because he at one point said people should go out and vote, I don't know how much it matters. I think it matters to some extent. I think if he told his viewers to go out and vote, some of them would go out and vote. But I mean, just saying that in the past he told people to be mobilized and now he didn't, doesn't necessarily mean that he has a lot of resources. It just means that people had wanted to go to his show before to try to get people mobilized. But I mean, he has a big audience. He does have influence. That is true. I just don't know how much this implies he necessarily has. Who's excited about Joe Biden? Hasan has never been the biggest Biden fan, so his disregard for the top of this year's ticket is not much of a surprise. I'm not the biggest Biden fan either, but I also understand the stakes for this election, and so I'm going to be in favor of voting for the option that I think is going to prioritize the interests that I care more about. And so if I care about, you know, not suspending the U.S. Constitution to install somebody as president, which Donald Trump has advocated for, I got to go for the option that isn't Donald Trump. If I care about how good the NLRB has been for labor unions during the Biden presidency, then I would want to see Biden have another term if he's the other option. And I could go down all the issues for this. Child tax credit, something I care about, help cut childhood poverty in half. Republicans voted against it. If we had a majority in the House and Senate, we could bring it back. And there's a bunch of policies I can go one by one by one. There's stuff I disagree with Biden on. I think he was much too slow to stop the offensive weapons sales to Israel. And I think it should have still been even more encompassing the blockage of sales or the sending of weapons. And I mean, people would say, oh, that's crazy. You could be asking that of Joe Biden. If Ronald Reagan can stop F-16 shipments over the invasion of southern Lebanon, I think Biden can add some pressure. I understand the circumstances are different between the invasion of southern Lebanon and October 7th and what happened. But, you know, there's stuff I disagree with Biden on. But when I go issue by issue, and even the ones I have a problem on, like Israel-Palestine, I come to the conclusion that having Biden in there is going to be better for the world generally and the United States than if it was Donald Trump. And if those are the two options, I'm going to lean towards the one. I'm going to lean towards the one because I don't see voting as me picking my best friend. I don't see voting as an endorsement of the individual necessarily. I see voting as, you know, is almost like going down a checklist. Like, these are my two options. Of these two, which do I pick? Or if you live in a parliamentarian system, maybe you've got more free reign. Maybe if you don't vote in a first past the post system, then you can have more free reign. But that's the system we live in right now. It's a duopoly, and it's one or the other. And so I'm going to put my weight behind the one that is better on the issues I care about. And even on the issue of Israel-Palestine, which I know is a big motivator against people going to vote for Joe Biden, Donald Trump said, bomb the families of terrorists. That's his solution for terrorism, right? His critique of the Israeli government could be that Ben-Gvir guy doesn't have enough influence. His critique, I mean, we saw the Trump-Jared Kushner negotiated peace plan. It was garbage. And so all of the stuff that I care about, better under Joe Biden. All of the stuff, well, at least a lot of the stuff that they care about would still technically be better under Joe Biden. Now, you can sit out morally or for personal satisfaction, but just understand that that's not a calculated strategic move. That's your personal dissatisfaction with Joe Biden due to the actions he's taken in office, angering you enough to make you not vote for him, even though the other option is worse, meaning you are taking the risks that things get worse over your personal, immediate objections to Joe Biden's policies, even though they're not as bad, and Donald Trump's would be worse. And I can understand that from kind of a like a personal level. I can understand that, the anger from personal level, because I didn't like voting for Joe Biden last time, and I still would prefer to vote for somebody else if I had the opportunity. But considering what has gotten done during his administration when it comes to like infrastructure investment, or when it comes to the scheduling of marijuana, or when it comes to the child tax credit, when it comes to all these issues, plus how things could get worse, I don't really see it as much of a choice for me. Anyway, I don't want to prattle on for too long. Let's keep reading. I think that lesser evil voting is working for you. If it makes you feel better, go ahead, he told us. One thing he definitely, again, but I'm not going to tell my voters, like on a personal level, like I can't tell them all what to do. I can't force them in anything. But I think you should speak with people like straight up about what the stakes are, what happens if this person wins, what happens if the other person wins, what are the stakes, what could happen, how strong are the American institutional guardrails to stop Trump from implementing Project 2525, from implementing the complete dismissal of all of the bureaucrats that make the system run, replacing them with his own so it can have institutional capture. Like these are the stakes. In my mind, these are the stakes. And so if it makes you feel better, should not be the way that we vote. I think strategically as a movement. And when I say we as a movement, I mean the general left wing in the United States. One thing he definitely backs is voting uncommitted. I'm an advocate of full-blown pressure, he said. Well, I would imagine in the primary that would have much of an impact. It would have an impact. In the general, what is that going to do? Especially if we don't know if the war in Gaza is even going to continue to be going on in the general election. I just don't know what an uncommitted vote in the general will do. Like you get 5% uncommitted. Like you make a splash. Joe Biden loses. Trump's president tries to implement Project 2525. All of that, hey, we made a splash, isn't going to feel that good once the splash you made is 2 more conservative Supreme Court appointments and Roe versus Wade getting not only gutted, but having its corpse dragged through the street as abortion ban after abortion ban is passed on the state level, and restrictions on abortion are then placed on the federal level. And there's no Biden there to veto it. And I mean, like, I'm not a huge fan of Hillary Clinton. And I didn't want to vote for Hillary Clinton in general. In fact, you could have probably, if I was voting in 2016, I wouldn't have voted for Hillary. Probably wouldn't have voted for Trump. Probably would have voted in Bernie. But I was too young to vote, so it is what it is. But that would have been unwise, even considering that, because at the end of the day, we got 3 conservative Supreme Court picks that end up seeing Roe versus Wade getting overturned. On that alone, Hillary would have been better than Donald Trump. And I think Roe versus Wade was important enough to fight for it. And I think Sam Cedar was right when he debated Jimmy Dore on the issue. And I think those people who wanted to make a protest vote like Jimmy Dore back in 2016, when he said that 3 Supreme Court, conservative Supreme Court appointments are as likely as the moon falling in to Lake Michigan, I think he was proven wrong. And ever since he was proven wrong, I've been looking at the moon suspicious, seeing if it was going to ram itself into a lake. So I don't feel like seeing people make the same mistake again. Biden shouldn't expect any of the little support Piker offered last time around. I urged and lent support to Joe Biden in the last election. And there were a lot of promises that he made in the last election on domestic policy, codifying Roe v. Wade, protecting abortion rights and immigration, Piker told us. He was going to basically reverse everything that Donald Trump had done, and he did none of that. As for codifying Roe v. Wade, we were unable to codify Roe v. Wade. The vote to codify Roe v. Wade did not have a 60-vote majority. Now, there's a question about throwing out the filibuster in that instance, but that was something that our Democratic majority did not support. Joe Manchin didn't support it, and Kyrsten Sinema didn't support it. And so unless you get their support, you can't get that passed. Now, I hear people say, like, bully Joe Manchin, but Joe Manchin's not going to be the senator from West Virginia come next term. He's going to be replaced. Like, having a Democrat even in West Virginia is a goddamn miracle in the first place. You're not just going to be able to, like, intimidate him out of it, because what are you going to say? We're going to primary you? Who are you going to get? Richard Ojeda? Are you going to get, like, Paula Jean Swearigan? No, that's not going to happen. So it was a situation where I wish we could have codified Roe v. Wade, but there's only so much blame you can place at Joe Biden. The larger piece of blame would be the Supreme Court appointments that kind of decided the case way before Biden was even president. I mean, there were promises, for example, that had disappointed me on Biden. For example, he talked about a public option. And while it's not what I ultimately want for American healthcare, a public option that competes with private options to bring down the prices and help get more people sign on to health insurance would be better. We have more Americans sign on to health insurance now under the Biden administration than under any previous presidency. So that's good. That's a step forward. It's not the public option that I was promised, but we also don't have the votes. Anyway, just a little bit of but he should have campaigned on it more. He should have rammed his fist down on it more. A public option is popular. It's popular, popular, popular. I don't know why he doesn't talk about it more. He was going to basically reverse everything that Donald Trump had done, and he did none of that. Well, he did reverse things that Donald Trump did. He didn't reverse everything, he reversed many of them. Biden administration has actually had a lot of successes. But even when Biden secures significant funding for a project or campaign promise, his team has never been good at relaying that to voters. Even Biden's TikTok is barely about Biden. It mostly bashes Trump rather than communicating the president's accomplishments. But that gets at the communication of it all. And Hasan also touched on something pertinent that everyone seems to be talking about this week. The youth vote. On the podcast, on the pod, I don't know what he means on the pod. So does it mean on a show or was he on a podcast? Is this just like Wired trying to like be hip with the words, or was there like, I just don't know what podcast he's talking about, because nobody refers to a Twitch stream as on the pod. I would assume it's a podcast, which, I mean, a Twitch stream is not usually referred to. Either way, on the pod, Piker explains his and his young audience's disenchantment with Biden and their sense that the president has walked back many of his promises he made to them in the last cycle. If I'm young, I don't see anyone right now that is captivating me, Piker told me. I mean, you could point towards the student debt that was canceled, which is significant, but it wasn't a complete sweep of student debt cancellation. I mean, I think it was the Senate. Was it the Senate parliamentarian that said you couldn't do that? Or did they say that on minimum wage? They might have done both. I know they said it on minimum wage. But there's a legal argument about whether or not the president can, through executive action, just cancel all student debt. And I think the Biden administration has come to the conclusion that it's no, but some progressive activists like Carl Kalinsky say that it's yes. I'm not a legal expert. I'm not going to pretend to argue to you which way or the other. In my view, it seems to be that the progressives that want student debt canceled believe that it can be canceled, and the people who are either on the fence or don't want it say otherwise. So go talk to a lawyer about it. I don't need to tell you. Pollsters and strategists like to make the case that Biden won the last election in part to the young voters that turned out for him. But over the past few months, polling has suggested that the support is wavering. By the way, I don't know how much of the case it is that young people turning out is what helped Biden. It seemed to be in 2020 that suburbanite America turned against Trump. And generally speaking, that was the lion's share of what helped deliver Biden the victory, and the mobilization of the black vote in places like Georgia. The youth vote, there were young voters. I mean, I was a young voter for Biden. Not that a young voter for Biden in Maryland means much. But there are youth voters that had some impact somewhere, obviously. I mean, when you win a state by like 10,000, 15,000 votes, those youth votes have an impact. But when we say a large reason, I would just say a reason. Youth voter turnout has always been a problem, but it's especially a problem right now. Streamers like Piker are arguably some of the most, by the way, one of the main ways I think we can get young people out to vote, and this is my stance. Look, even if you are not going to vote in the election for either candidate because you're so against it, I do agree in that scenario, you should vote undecided just to show that there's more young people voting, therefore giving you more as a class political weight, meaning politicians know you are willing to put in the effort to actually go to the polls and have an impact on whether they have a job or not. They might then go reach out to you more. Either way, you should go to the polls, no matter if you're going to vote for a candidate or not vote for a candidate. You should go to the polls to increase that political weight, to increase that leverage. I still think you should vote for Joe Biden because of the stakes of this election, but no matter what, you should be going out to the polls. Streamers like Piker are arguably some of the most influential creators on the internet, and there's no doubt that they could have a real impact on 2024. Earlier this week, I spoke with Samuel, the founder of Progressive Victory. This is the group that I am a part of, a liberal group that works with streamers to get out the vote initiatives. He told me I was part of the Get Out the Vote initiative in Ohio, for example, where we hit like, I think it was like 40,000 doors. He told me that Twitch's format allows for the kind of back and forths that can change a person's mind. Quote, the long-form discussions allow for a lot of nuance and detail to be discussed and creates a greater understanding, like these people are educating their audiences when they choose to speak on issues. Progressive Victory's approach to moving online activism into IRL has proven successful. In a recent Ohio canvassing event, the group was able to bring together around 20 streamers, 300 volunteers to knock on 40,000 doors for state progressives. They've built communities around their personalities and the way that they speak to their audiences. The live nature allows for the creators to make really compelling asks of their audience and can get people to take crazy amounts of action. Unlike Samuel's group, Piker focuses more on issues of advocacy than electoral politics. Though he will sometimes encourage followers to vote in down-ballot elections, his largest priorities are the causes he cares about. I think that my impact is way more important when it comes to a Chipotle unionizing in Lansing, Michigan. I went to a UCLA encampment, and all the SGP and JVP students I met were like, I'm here because I started watching you in 2020, and you really broadened my horizons. This is the thing. I'm not against bringing attention to these causes. Like, for example, bringing attention and money and eyes to a unionizing effort, fantastic. Even if all it does is fundraises for them, and that, in the end, is usually most of what it does. It's very rare that a viewer actually would get out of their ass, travel halfway across the country to sit somewhere, especially when you're talking about these local issues, which, I mean, are local. And so if you have viewers all around the world, the idea that they're going to come out to this one spot, it does happen, as we showed in Ohio, but it takes a lot of effort. If you are going to do that, though, I'll just say that Hasan being able to mobilize, like, somebody to knock 50,000 doors for like left-wing candidates in the Democratic Party, trying to get more people who are avowed socialists. This is a way he could use that leverage to benefit politics electorally. It probably would mean he could even get more like politician interviews. Like there's ways that could benefit him, and there's ways that could benefit, I think, the causes that he cares about. Because ultimately, like the causes he cares about, like unionizing, if you want to strike down right-to-work laws, which undercut unions' ability to organize in the South, you're going to need the legislators in office to overturn those laws. At some point, you have to engage with the electoral system. You can do what leftists call usually direct action, and you can go try to support those unions and go support individual protests. But at the end of the day, when pen goes to paper on policy, we should be in the room. And the way we get in the room is by getting our candidates elected so that they have to be in the room. The impact won't be reaching the Biden campaign anytime soon. The Biden campaign declined to comment on what Hasan said about voting, but it has made significant investments in relation. Are you telling me that they took a Hasan quote and threw it at the Biden campaign?
Burns.
Did that happen?
Immoral,
they took a Hasan quote and
bankrupt man
and threw it at. So, excuse me, we have this streamer. We want to ask you about what he said about voting and 9/11, Mr. President. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just gotta say that once you come out and say what he said about 9/11, go after any politician. All that you got to do for the vast majority of people, quote tweet that, quote tweet whatever they said with him saying that, and it's over. It's done. Americans will see him as like an American-hating terror sympathizer immediately. By the way, this is the same problem Destiny has with all the quotes, crazy quotes that he has said as well. More similarities than many people would think. It's almost like they were born from the same forge. Okay, anyway, continuing. That impact won't be reaching the Biden campaign anytime soon. The Biden campaign declined to comment on what Hasan said about voting, but it made significant investments in its relationships with supportive influencers, as we've talked about multiple times in the newsletter. But is a video with Luke Skywalker more effective than deeply engaged online communities? I guess we'll find out. My answer to that probably would be, yeah, it's Luke Skywalker. I mean, if it was like 10, 20, 30 communities, maybe a little different. But if we're talking about Luke Skywalker or Hasan, I do think Luke Skywalker more. Okay? I do think Luke Skywalker more. On Monday, I spoke with Erin Hattemer, a comedian on TikTok with more than 1.6 million followers. For the past week, she has spearheaded a program called Pass the Hat, pairing creators like herself with families in Gaza to raise money for them to either evacuate, pay medical bills, or rebuild their lives. The grassroots group's Operation Olive Branch finds and verifies the family in need, and as of this week, Hattemer has matched more than 700 Palestinian families with online creators. Once a creator is paired with a family, the creator will continue to post about them and their GoFundMes until their goals are reached. This actually sounds really cool. I'm working on it all day. I'll take breaks, but I'm working on emails. I do a lot of coaxing of creators. Evacuation is just the first step. The infrastructure in Gaza doesn't exist anymore. And there's some people who want to stay and rebuild. There's some people that need to fully start new lives in Egypt or wherever they're going next. So it's about continued support. For months now, TikTok users have been demanding that their favorite creators speak out on Palestine. In the past few days, I've seen far more creators speaking out on the conflict than before, and I bet it's largely due to Hattemer pestering them. This gets at the question of whether influencers with platforms should be required to speak out on political injustices. We saw this at a scale with the George Floyd protests in 2020, and again now. What do you think? Leave a comment. What do I think? Honestly, you want my legit opinion? It would be cool if content creators could speak on issues that they care about. That'd be great. But honestly, most of the time, I think it would be much better if those content creators just gave their platform to somebody else to talk about it. Because I saw like Ludwig was getting heat because he didn't want to do like a fundraiser for Palestine. So instead he just donated personally $10,000. And I think Frogan, like another streamer, called him like, he called it like a cracker ass take. And I was just sitting there thinking like, do we really need Ludwig's opinion on Israel-Palestine? Do we? What's Ludwig gonna say? What is Ludwig gonna say, honestly? Like, maybe like a fundraiser would fundraise more money, but I don't like, what is he gonna add? Like, the most he could do is bring attention, but it would be better, in my opinion, if some content creators kept their mouths shut. Because when some content creators open their mouths, they do more damage than good because they just don't know what they're talking about. Or they've learned everything they know from like a Twitter thread. And so I would say there's a question about fundraising. I think it's always good to fundraise for good causes. But when it comes to speaking out, unless you're going to keep it extremely vague and simple, only people who know what they're saying should speak out. So I don't really know how much Ludwig knows about the conflict. Like, probably enough to put out a vague statement. But I don't want like on the ground, not on the ground, but like on the fly JDAM identification anymore, you know? Anyway, I think that using your power for electoral politics is also good. I think it's also important. I think this election, there's too much at stake to play games about electoral politics. And I think that you don't need to be excited about Joe Biden to understand that there were wins that should be celebrated, and on top of the wins that should be celebrated, that left-wingers in this country sometimes have a real problem understanding that things can get much, much, much worse. Boop. Okay, we did that topic. Look at that.